In this tutorial, I'm going to show you guys how we can create histograms inside Matplotlib. So we all know what histograms are, and we've been using them for a long time, just not in Matplotlib. So let's discuss how we can create these in Matplotlib and customize them using several of the functions and parameters that Matplotlib has given us. Okay, so here's some data for our histogram, and we're going to plot this in today's video. So first we'll create our figure and axis object, okay? And once this is done, we can use the axis object, the hist function, to create our histogram. We just need to pass in our values in here, and then we need to define the bins. Okay, now if you're familiar with histograms, you know that they have a system of bins or a system of intervals. And all the values that we have here are going to basically be placed in those predefined intervals. Okay, so for example, I can make intervals here from 0 to 25, 25 to 50, 50 to 75, and 75 to 100. Okay, so basically I made 1, 2, 3, and 4. There are 4 bins in here. Okay, now if I just do plt.show, all of these values will be automatically placed within these bins. Okay, and let's just see the output here. Okay, and on the y-axis we can see the count for these bins. Now the x labels are a bit off, so let's fix those first. Okay, otherwise I won't be able to properly explain this. Set x ticks. Okay, and I'll just copy paste these in here. Okay, this is just so that we can get the x ticks to align up with the bins. Okay, so now the labels are matching. Okay, 0 to 25, 25 to 50, 50 to 75, and 75 to 100. Okay, that's good. So basically over here the histogram shows us that we have 3 values inside the 0 to 25 bin. Okay, the y-axis shows 3. Okay, that's how we know. Similarly, there are 4 values in the 25 to 50 bin, and there are 6 values in the 50 to 75 bin, and there are only 2 values in the 75 to 100 bin. Okay, so that's what this histogram shows us. Now let's take a look at how we can customize this, and different ways in which we can use these parameters. So one thing we can do is change the color. Obviously we can change the color to say red, and this gives us a nice red graph. Okay, and yeah, so we can also change the orientation. So the orientation can be vertical. Also, I'm not sure what this is gonna do. This is the first time. Wait, default is vertical, so let's try horizontal. Okay, horizontal. Oh, okay. And we'll need to change the ticks a bit. Okay, let me just remove that, change these to y ticks. And there we go. Okay, that worked out pretty nicely. Better than I expected. Okay, so yeah, that just changes the orientation. And let's take a look at another thing. Let me just undo that. Okay, alright, back to vertical, and I want to show you guys the align parameter. Now just take another look at this graph before I show you that parameter. We have our ticks here. The ticks here are currently perfectly lined up with the ending and the start and the end of the bins. Okay, so we have 0, okay, then we have 25. So the histogram, the individual bars in this histogram are currently perfectly aligned up with 0 and 25, and then 25 to 50. They're perfectly aligned with the boundaries of the bin. But if I use this align parameter here, we can actually change this behavior. The default is mid, okay, which gives us that behavior. If I change it to left, then we'll actually end up going a bit to the left. Okay, so now instead of the bin starting at 0, it's actually, well, the bin is still technically starting at 0, okay, but it's just changing itself a bit. Okay, let me just remove this as well. Comment this out. if I just comment that out and let it go to its default settings, well, it's the same thing. So never mind. I didn't expect that. All right. So if I just do this again, we can just see that it's moved about half of its width to the left. Okay. And if I turn this to right, it's going to move about half of its width to the right. Okay. So normally it's perfectly aligned up with the bin boundaries like 0 and 25, but if I turn this to left, it's going to be centered on its, the lower boundary. It's going to be centered around 0, and if I make this align is equal to right, it's going to be centered around 25, or sorry, the upper boundary. Okay, and if we do align is equal to mid, which is the default, it's going to be centered in the middle. Okay, which is 0 plus 25 divided by 2, 12.5. Alright, anyways, so let's take a look at some more examples, and for that I'm going to change the data set. There's actually this data set, or this way of generating data, that I found from the Matplotlib documentation. I just copied that from there, so let's use this instead. There's one or two different things I want to show you, which won't really come across that well if we're using the old data set. Okay, so now here we have a lot of data. We're basically generating 10,000 numbers. Okay, we're generating 10,000 numbers. So I'm not going to sit down here and define all of those bins. Now I could define some very large bins, like 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, so on. But even still, that's not very efficient. What if you want a lot of bins, like 100 or so? So there's actually a better way of doing so. Obviously, you could just write a function to generate a string, but there's a very easy way of doing so that Matplotlib gives us, and that is simply to pass in an integer in the bins parameter. So what this is going to do is automatically generate 50 bins for us. Okay, and observe. There we go. There's our histogram. Okay, and this is the kind of data that histograms are actually suited for, because the stuff I was showing you earlier could easily be represented on a bar chart or something like that. So this is a good use of a histogram. All right, so let me show you something else. We can use this parameter called rwidth, and this can actually adjust the ratio of the bar in contrast to the bin, because normally this has a value of 1, which means it takes up 100% of the available space. You can reduce this to 0.9 and it'll take up 90% of the available space. So this gives us some little spacing in between the bars, and this can make it look like individual bars instead of one complete figure. So this gives it a bit of a nice look, especially when there are a lot of bars. So this is something to consider using. Other than this, we also have the hist type parameter, and this parameter can change the way the bar looks a bit. Let me just remove the rwidth right now. So the default value here is bar, which gives us the effect we see. Then there's also step, okay, which kind of gives us a very step kind of look, like, yeah, it's like a step ladder kind of look, or the steps in the stairs. It's kind of like that. It's not filled basically. So yeah, this is good. It gives you a kind of an outline on the graph. Okay, it's not bad. Okay, so yeah, I think that just about covers most of it. I don't think there's anything left. There is this parameter called cumulative, and if you turn this true, then it kind of turns into a cumulative graph. And well, you can see already what's happening here. It's basically adding on. I'm not sure why there's that steep, maybe it's because of the align parameter. Okay, I guess that's normal. Alright, so cumulative basically makes this cumulative, okay? And we all know what a cumulative graph is. Basically, each bin is the sum of itself and all the bins before it. So eventually, we see 10,000 over here, okay? So the last bin is going to be the number of elements inside the last bin are going to be equal to the total number of elements in the entire, histogram. So that's how the cumulative parameter works. And obviously, I've only covered about half of the different customizations in histograms. If you're interested in further customization and further, more interesting options and stuff, you can go take a look at the Matplotlib documentation. And yeah, that's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you want to see more Matplotlib content in the future, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Okay, we have a lot more content coming out, and we're just about done, almost done with the 2D graphs in Matplotlib, because this is a whole series. And we're about to start some very interesting topics, so definitely stay tuned, okay? We're not going to be covering graphs anymore. We'll be talking more about the different features in Matplotlib and how we can use them to make our graph experience, to make our graphs more interactive, and a bunch of more interesting and exciting features. So yeah, see you guys in a later video. Bye then.